And there we go. All right. Well, welcome to Charter Director meeting. Today is Monday, January 10th, 2022. And we anticipate our meeting going from 12:30 to 3:30 today. And again, thank you so much for being here. We're excited to see you. And if you're catching us later on a replay, we're glad that you are taking time to rewatch or watch for the first time. We'll start with our opening business today. We have our SCSB Executive Director, Jennifer Lambert, who will start us off, and then I will take you through our In Case You Missed It, and then we'll get into the meat of our meeting. So Jennifer, we will turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Marie. And for those of you participating in the questions, that was fun to hear the things that you put. And it's so great to hear so many people have high energy today and are looking positively at everything. So I think that's wonderful. I have a few things to share with you, and I believe, Marie, you have these listed on the slide. Is that correct, to remind me?
I did not list them, but I have them on my handy notes, so I'll make sure everything.
Then I'll just go. I won't wait for you to scroll somewhere else.
Perfect.
The first thing I want to do is to introduce a new staff member. So when we had Robert Kahutek, he was a portfolio manager for some schools. He also does data for us. And we found that we needed someone to do data full time. And so we moved him to focus on data and to do that for all schools. We had a need to replace him as a portfolio manager. And we are so excited. We hired Brendan McGinn, who he used to be at Soldier Hollow. And Brendan, I saw that you were on. Would you mind turning on your camera and just giving a short introduction so everyone can get to know you? Is that okay? I forgot to tell you I was going to do this morning. And Tess says she's a big fan of Brendan's. I agree. He's only been with us for a week, but even from his interviews, we were super impressed. And this week, he's just been great. So it looks like he's maybe not able to join in. So we'll just move on from there, but just know that he may be contacting you if you are one of the schools and just trying to get to know you. And so if you are one of his schools and you have questions, he can be a great point of contact. So you can just contact one person and then not have to search around and guess who to reach. And then he can do that legwork for you. And that's true for others of you. You may already know your portfolio manager, Liz Bunker or Andrew Varda Stone. There's been a few changes of just reordering with Brendan coming on, but they are great resources for you to reach out to. Of course, like myself and Marie and others in the staff are always here to help you, but sometimes it's easier to just email one person rather than trying to figure out who do I talk to. Trying to think what were some of the other things I did want to talk about. I know for those of you in Salt Lake County, it seems to be Salt Lake County is the area where it is the most challenging, but it's also in Summit County. There was a mask mandate. As far as I'm reading from the news and on all the back and forth, that is standing. The latest I heard from the Salt Lake County chair is that she's not planning on having this on their agenda and reviewing the mask mandate. So it does stand. If you look at the mask mandate, it is to individuals and it includes everywhere in the county. It is not specifically targeted to schools. And so I know I've gotten some questions about what do you guys have to do in terms of enforcement. There is, when I read the order, there is nothing that requires schools to enforce this, but it is a mandate countywide. There are masks, I believe, still available if you want to have some. The person at the state level that I've been told to contact is Sarah Dash. and I believe it's just sarah-at-utah.gov. That is an individual that you can, no, I'm sorry, her email is s-at-utah.gov. And so that's someone that you can contact if you need masks. I'm trying to think and just look at the other things. The board meetings. So USBE does have their board meetings on Thursday and Friday. They did not hold it the first Thursday of the week like they do normally, I'm guessing because of the holidays. Because they're holding their meeting on Thursday, we moved our meeting, the State Charter School Board's meeting, to Wednesday. And this is actually a pretty big meeting for us. It is where we consider the new school requests and satellite requests. And right now we have two applicants that want to open new schools and 3 schools that are requesting satellites. And those will be heard on Thursday. The state Wednesday, sorry, not Thursday. On Thursday is the State Board of Education's meeting. I confess, with our meeting coming up, I haven't had a chance to look through their agenda to see if there's anything of note, but you can find their agenda on their website if you have any questions on that. Does anyone have any questions for me? And I did see Brendan, it looked like you were trying to say something for a minute.
Jennifer, I have a question if Brendan doesn't.
Sure, go ahead, Steve.
And this may not be something that you can answer, but I hope with the group that's on here, maybe some direction. Just back with regard to the mask mandate in some in Salt Lake counties and the question of mask exemptions. I wonder if someone has a sample policy on how they go about sort of dealing with those exemption requests, what kinds of things they require, what kind of doctor's note would be acceptable. How are people handling those requests if you're getting them?
Steve, I would open it up to the group. Just I can tell you from what I have seen. I confess I don't know Summit County's public order as well as I know Salt Lake County's because I live in Salt Lake. I work in Salt Lake County, so I don't know Summit County's order as well, and so I can't tell you the details on that. I know for Salt Lake County, it doesn't give requirements on the exemptions, at least that I saw. It did not require that it had to be a doctor's note. What I would caution you against is requiring more than what is required in the order.
Yeah, the order just says there are medical exemptions granted, but that's a pretty broad category, and the best person that seems to make a medical exemption would be a medical official. But that's common sense, I know, and maybe doesn't apply in this situation.
Just to add to that really quick, I don't know, Steve, did you see the press release that came from Dr. Dunn 9 p.m. last night? Because I had not, so I'd reached out with these same questions. And in that, it's in Salt Lake County, in bold, it states that a doctor does not need to sign it. And so that would be up to an LEA to, she doesn't even say it in there. It just simply says the doctor's note's not required. Again, this is pertaining to students, not faculty. I don't know if you were, which one you were referring to, but.
Yeah, this would be students.
Yeah, so it's in bold in that press release that she sent out. It didn't go out to like, anyway, I don't know why we didn't receive it. Because the first person I got it from was a parent walking in with it. So.
Okay. I haven't seen that. So Madden, if you can share that with us or share it with me.
Jennifer,
So
do you have that? Because I could forward it to you. Jennifer.
Yeah, so if you can forward it, then I could send it to Steve. But Steve, I do want to caution you what Tana is talking about is for Salt Lake County.
Right.
And so I don't know, that's where I said, I know the Salt Lake County mask order pretty well. I don't know Summit's. I don't know, do you have a good relationship with your local health department? Because yeah, I would suggest asking them.
I've reached out to
because
them. I think they're overloaded right now.
I'm sure they are. It seems like in the media and just in general, the biggest consternation has been over Salt Lake County. It seems that Summit has just kind of flown under the radar in general. But that doesn't mean that you guys aren't getting the same types of concerns. And the orders just are different. And so you want to make sure that you're addressing your county's order.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Great question. Any other questions?
Jennifer, did you want to talk about the, as they're beginning to work on calendars and kind of the coming
Yes.
year and the end of the waiver exemption from their charter agreements?
Thank you. I had on my other screen, and I try not to because then it looks weird that I'm looking away from you guys and reading on my other screen. But yes, I did have that. So as you guys we're ending what we started 2 years ago under the State Charter School Board, where we gave that flexibility to your charters that anyone could run a distance program or to go online or remote. We aren't talking about emergency type of situations. So for example, if you hit the test to stay and you're over the threshold and you work with your health department and you have to go remote, we're not talking about that. We're talking about where you actually plan to do either a blended program or a fully remote program, and it's not in your charter. And so if you want to continue that, we did have in there the criteria where we would agree automatically to you adding that to your charter ongoing if you met that criteria. And so I just want to remind everyone that this would be around the time that if you want to look at having it ongoing in your charter, this would be the time for you to take a look at that. If you do no longer have those documents, and we had a form, we had some FAQs all about it, contact either myself or Marie, and we can get you those forms and that information, and we can work with you on it. If you don't want to do it ongoing, you say, I'm done with this remote and you want to go back to normal, that is just fine. You don't need to do anything. As I said, if there's things that require you to do remote on a just meeting emergency needs type basis, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about actual changes to your program, such as adding a program or changing your current program to something that is different from what you've been doing before COVID. Any other questions on that?
Jennifer, it looks like Brett at Ames might have one. He started in chat, but I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. He says, if an unvaccinated student refuses to wear a mask in an extracurricular event, what are the options?
So I've answered this for a couple of schools. When I look at the order and just knowing from past orders and just how things were dealt, I cannot see in that order anywhere where it requires schools to have to enforce it. So in fact, I think it even says in the Salt Lake order that they aren't looking to put anyone in jail, if they aren't wearing a mask. So as a school, I would be very cautious in trying to take on the county's job of enforcing, and especially with some of the other laws and things that have been passed, that if you bar entry to a student unless they're wearing a mask, I don't know where that would be a question for attorneys, but I would be careful on going about that. I think you're probably safest if you just keep pointing them back to the county order and, encouraging it. But I get your teachers and your coaches may have differences of opinions. I don't have good answers for that. It's tough. I know that there's a lot of fears on both sides of the issue. I know myself, I definitely, as long as I'm wearing a mask, I feel a little more safe, and I'm being careful on that. to making sure that I'm doing all that I can to protect myself and others, and that I'm hopeful that that can make enough of a difference for those that are refusing to comply. Suzanne made a very good point that the primary method of enforcing will be education and providing masks. And that is, I think that is probably as a school is as much as you can do. So Brett said something about, so now law or legal. So I'm guessing you may want to help me understand this, Brett. So you're saying no law or legal response to this? Not to my knowledge. And then Stephanie, the Salt Lake Health Department told me that they can't even force anyone. We don't have legal authority either. All we can do is provide information about the mandate and let a student know our preference, but no one can be forced. Thank you, Stephanie. That is actually what I wanted to say, but I want to be also very careful that if I say something and then it ends up being wrong, then I just don't want to cause you guys problems. But I do have to say what the gist of what's mostly in comments is what I have found. I don't have any formal legal opinion or formal message that I have seen come out from the State Board of Education on this.
Okay, great. Yeah. And that's really what the health department has said, that we, it's a mandate, and we can hope that most comply, but we are not getting into arguments with parents or students about it, that because we don't have any legal authority, and they keep telling me we don't, the health department doesn't actually have legal authority either to enforce it and like to force anyone to do it. So what, keeping it where it's not as tense as possible is what we're trying to do. So
thank you. And I do know back when there was that mandate coming out that everyone on buses needed to be masked. And the question was, well, now bus drivers, do they refuse people to get on your school buses? And the answer came down is, yes, that is the rule. The rule is the mandate is to the individual. It's not a requirement of schools or bus drivers to enforce it. So there is a difference between, stating, yes, we follow the rule, but that doesn't mean you have to enforce it.
correct. And to the answer, the question was, what are you doing to for exemptions, I can't remember who asked that, but as far as people, do we have a form or anything? And all we're doing, we talked to our attorney earlier, is all we're doing is just letting parents know, if you are requesting an exemption, please let the front office know in writing, and we will document that. And so we're keeping it as simple as possible. And then we let the teachers know that the parents have made a request as well. So
that's probably wise. Thank you, Stephanie.
mm-hmm.
And Marie, I just want to let you know that you're no longer showing the PowerPoint. You're showing your
Oh no. Okay, let me
documents.
stop that. Sorry. You would think
And
after
then-
like 2 years I'd be better at Zoom meetings, but here we are, Monday.
Chris said that schools can't implement a mandate unless county health department and county commission agree on a mandate. I don't know the point there. I do know that there are mandates that are in effect right now in Salt Lake County and Summit County. And unless those are changed through some other political action, those will remain until the end of those orders. And then Brett said to everyone, thank you. And then I guess that you're saying you need a legal opinion on this. I don't disagree. I would suggest talking to your own attorneys. Stephanie mentioned that she had been in conversation with her attorney. I think that is a really strong idea for all of you to do, to just make sure that you're handling any issues that come up in terms on your own basis. I would have to say that after the legislation that's been happening recently on this, everything got pushed down to the local level, which on one hand, that's a positive thing because we believe in local control. But on the other hand, that I know that makes it very difficult for you guys to know exactly how to handle things.
Just So it's pushed down to, this is Brett for everyone, it's pushed down to a local level. There's a school, there is a county mandate and a county commission mandate on no masks. But if a student doesn't wear a mask, we have no power to do anything but educate and quote the law.
As far as I can tell, yes. So it's wonderful, isn't it? Happy Monday. I get what you're saying, Brett, and I feel for you guys. I really do. Every time I see things like this, I get frustrated because I know you guys are the ones that you're caught in the middle and you're having to be on the front lines and having to deal with all this. And then no one really wants to give you help and support in how to answer all these questions. I know it's hard. I've been trying to tell you as much, and that's why I did want to bring it up, because I figured you're all dealing with this morning. And I apologize for those of you that don't live in Summit or Salt Lake counties. You can just enjoy that you're not dealing with this at the moment. Some of your counties may follow suit. I don't know, but it is hard. I hope that you've been given enough that you know that this is the legal or the political landscape that we live in, and this is the tightrope that we all have to walk. So. Brett, if you are talking to us, we can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for an honest response, and we will move forward. Thank you.
Great. And I just want to again thank all of you. I know we keep saying that it's tough and that and just the kudos to you, and then we keep saying it and it keeps staying tough and there's always new things, but I really do appreciate you guys, and I do appreciate your staff, your teachers. We do know that they are doing really great things, amazing things, and sometimes hard circumstances. So thank you. And I'll turn it back to you, Marie.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, well, we're going to move our, in case you missed it, section just to the end so that we can get back on track a little bit. We have Jeffrey Van Holten here, and he is the USPE Director of Public Affairs. And he's going to be talking today about the USPE Equity Rubric. And so we will turn the time over to you, Jeffrey.
Great. Happy Monday, everyone. We go from mask mandates to a board rule. We're diving in nice and deep today. Am I able to share my screen? I am. Perfect. So I am just going to quickly jump over the rule. This is R277-328. Some of you may be familiar with this rule, being in response to a lot of the conversation that had happened around critical race theory. Among other things, there were some joint resolutions passed in resolution passed in both the House and the Senate during the special session that specified and asked the board to clarify what is and is not allowed. And this was our best attempt to do so. So I'm just going to walk through really high levels so I don't take up too much time, and then answer questions that you may have about the elements of this rule that you'll see on the checklist to make sure that you're in compliance when you're giving your trainings. And so the beginning is always the definition. I always tell everyone, whether you're reading a board rule, an administrative rule from any state agency, or if you're reading a bill or state code, always read the definitions first, because that's where if somebody's got something they're trying to slip past you, they'll hide it in a definition. That's not the case here. But always start with the definition section because it's a little bit easier to navigate what everything actually means and is really saying. And I will drop a link as well. I don't know if that was for me or not, but I will drop a link to you to this rule in the chat. In fact, I'll do it now before I forget, because I'm that person. If I don't do it right here, right now, that way you can follow along. So the definitions here should not be. Is there a question? No. Someone forgot to mute. Check your mute, everyone. The definition for classroom instruction and curriculum is really pretty much taken from code. There's nothing really new there. The classroom instruction definition was actually taken from the sex ed code and just kind of generalized to be about classroom instruction generally. The big one I would highlight is what the board means by educational equity. This is a board approved definition. They had a definition they approved back in 2018. They tweaked it a little bit in 2021. Yeah, it was just this last year. Relatively the same, however. So if you're familiar with this definition from 2018, it hasn't changed. It's really centering around equitable resources and access to resources, but not guaranteeing equal outcomes. They did define inclusion. I did want to point this out. It's a term that I think many people use and have a general idea of what they think it means. I just wanted to point out they did define the word inclusion as well, usually in the context of belonging and inclusion. This addition was actually made by board member Cindy Davis and the board approved it. You'll notice it kind of has a very special ed lens. That's where a lot of the language was inspired from that I believe that board member Davis was utilizing for this definition. So where are we using these definitions and why do they matter? So this rule, high level, is about professional learning and also classroom instruction and curriculum as it relates to the conversation around what is and is not appropriate to discuss when it comes to more controversial topics around race or any other protected class. So race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, those types of things. There was a lot of conversation, as I'm sure all of you have been very well aware around this since 2020. So we start the rule out here in section 2. So -3 section 2 is how I'm going to kind of refer to it, just so you know what I'm referring to with these numbers. This lists about 10 things the board would like included in professional learning in general. We've gotten a lot of questions about like, do I need to make a professional learning that covers all 10 of these items? The answer is no. And frankly, the assumption is many of these things are already in professional learning of some kind that you already have or are putting out. So the hope is that many of this will not be overwhelming because it's something that you are already doing. So, and again, this can be done through the course of 10, 15, 20. If you want to do one, I mean, nobody's stopping you. I think that would be an intense training that would take a lot of time. But you've got all 10 items here. Some that I would point out that might be new, that you might already not have an existing training on or professional learning experience on would be aligning teaching practices to several of these elements. So here in B, as you see at the top of the screen, the board has a resolution denouncing racism and embracing equity in schools. The board's portrait of a graduate. Those are things that we have noticed professional learning opportunities may not exist around, which makes sense. These were board specific things recently created in the last couple of years or in the last few months. And I'll do the spoiler alert now. At the end, the board is required to create a model training for every element of this rule. So we will be creating model trainings for all of this, but that has also put us in a place where we now understand definitely how time intensive this could be as we're trying to do piece by piece a training for each of these relevant ones. So you'll see in the upcoming board meeting, they're going to be looking at approving a model training around the federal and state laws that govern these areas, a lot of civil rights laws. So there'll be a whole model training that we'll create on that you can adopt as your own, use or steal from. And we'll continue to do that for all of these different elements. So that is the one I did want to point out. There's about 10. So you have A through J here about the different things we want to see in professional learning. And then here, number 3, we list out the 4 areas that are prohibited. And this really centers around the conversation from critical race theory that we've been seeing nationally and here in the state of Utah. The language in A, B, and D were all pretty much copy and pasted from the Senate and House resolutions that were passed in the special session back in, I believe it was April of 21. So just under a year ago. And then the board added in C as its additional piece. So the one big thing I would highlight here for everyone to focus on, and I apologize, I'm house and dog sitting, and there is a very hungry poodle who is making all those weird noises, and she can wait. She's had so much beef jerky today, it's not even funny. So she just wants more, and I get it. We all love beef jerky. But these are the areas I really want to highlight right here in number 3, promote or endorse. This is a key piece. So this is where professional learning, classroom instruction, and curriculum should not promote or endorse these concepts. And I'll explain, the board does have a full training that they have created, a video training on interpreting this rule. So it's not a training on the professional learning or whatnot that we'll be looking for, but it's just to help all of you kind of understand what the parameters of the rule are. So as you're governing or creating your own professional learning curriculum or instruction, that you understand exactly the boundaries of the board intended. So I'll grab some notes from that in just a moment, and just know that video is going to be posted on our website. So if you want to do like the whole 30 to 40 minute training on this rule, it is there for you whenever you want it, or if you're having trouble sleeping at 2 a.m., it's a great way to kind of get yourself back into counting sheep. So A, B, C, and D, the 4 areas. So we're looking at protected classes. So the first one is that any group is inherently superior or inferior to another. The second one is that your membership in a group determines the content of your character. The third one is that your membership in a group means you bear responsibility for the past actions of members of your group. And the fourth one is that your membership within the group would result in discrimination or different treatment. So again, I want to highlight for you promote or endorse. And a great example that came up in the board meeting in this conversation was around teaching concepts or having conversations around World War II. So you have in history a group of people, Nazi Germany, that began to really promote the idea of certain races being inherently superior or inferior to one another. And that was a big part of what we see coming forth in World War II. And so a question would be, does this now prevent us from teaching something like the Diary of Anne Frank? Because you have a whole conversation about race, the Jewish race, whether or not it's inherently or superior or inferior is something that Nazi Germany is promoting and leading to what we see happening in all the historical events. And we would not want this rule to then suddenly prevent a whole conversation on World War II or any of the historical events or impetus for it. So you can see how promote or endorse suddenly becomes a very key phrase in what is prohibited. And I'm just going to quickly read for you what is in the full expanded training on this rule, what the board meant with that. And their note is, please note the emphasis is on the phrase promote or endorse, which means to present as facts, to further the progress of, or to approve, and I got to move my screen a little bit, to approve or support the concepts that you see here in the slide or in the rule. So that's the idea of don't promote or endorse these concepts that one race is superior or inferior to another, for example. But you can definitely have conversations around these concepts as long as they're not being presented as fact, or that these ideas are suddenly being approved or presented as the way to think. So we've had a lot of questions about that, and a lot of people, and we've seen some schools that I think Jordan High pulling it several of its courses, and internal conversations at the board have been, they can do that. I mean, that's their prerogative, but this rule would not be the justification in anyone at the board's mind to pull a course such as like a cultural course or something of that nature. If there's another reason why they want to pull it, that's their prerogative, as I said, but this rule would not justify that, because again, it's just about not promoting or endorsing these concepts, but those conversations still can be had. A couple of things I do want to note for all of you in terms of the thing we love and hate about board rules is they give us things to do, whether or not we want them. When it comes to professional learning, anytime a parent wants to see the professional learning, this rule would require that sometime before or after the professional learning is given, that you can make the materials available. The parent does have to have a student within the LEA in order to trigger the requirement that you as the LEA give the materials over. And then the board wanted to also have this rule and the checklist given with the materials so that the parent can see how you as the LEA feel that the professional learning complied with the rule. So that's one thing I definitely wanted to highlight. Make sure you have that checklist. We haven't heard from a lot of LEAs that this has been utilized by anyone yet, really, or if it has, nobody has made any comment up to the state level, but we haven't heard that this is like becoming a tsunami of requests, which I think some feared. I will also point out that if you're doing a professional learning experience in a one-on-one setting, it's more of a coaching or remediation session, this rule does not apply. So this is just about professional learning. And then now we'll jump into the section that talks about what pieces of this also applies to classroom and curriculum. And I'm just going to jump over to the chat because I know this is like super exhilarating. I'm not being as entertaining probably as I could be today. So I apologize. My energy is mid. I'm having a Monday, but I'm not low, just so you know. Will it be a model training or an online training that our school personnel can access? So Jason, don't quote me on this, but this is my understanding. I reserve the right to be completely wrong. But as I understand, the board and the staff at the board will be creating the model trainings in module format with recordings so that they're available at any time for people to use and download and present to staff when they would like, or to tell staff you need to review this in the next 2 weeks or whatever format you would prefer to use. But my understanding is it will be all kind of turnkey for you. So if you want to adopt it as your own. And Malia is here and says that is how she understands it as well. Excellent. Thank you, Malia. So the second piece of this is we've talked about professional learning. We'd like to see the 10 elements, A through J, which I feel like is 8, but anyway, there's 10 elements within that list. The 4 things we should not promote or endorse. And now the question is, so from those 2 lists, the things we'd like to see and the things that shouldn't be promoted or endorsed, which of those elements also applies in the classroom instruction setting and for curriculum generally? So, which is strange. We don't normally blend the world of professional learning and classroom instruction and curriculum. But in this case, there was a lot of conversation around how these conversations happen in all of those settings. So that is why you see this rule kind of taking on a very unprecedented approach. So first, I would just point out ABC here in 1 is that curriculum and classroom instruction just needs to follow the law, needs to be in alignment with the Utah standards for that course, whatever the course is, and it needs to be age appropriate. And the vast majority of the complaints we've seen at the board level when parents have pushed their complaint up is typically not that the conversation was a violation of the rule, but the conversation probably wasn't appropriate for the grade that it happened in. So that's the one area where I think you might see some pushback more than others, is just always check to make sure that it's age appropriate for the grade that you're presenting the instruction in, because that's where we've had the most complaints. If you provide curriculum that discusses, and this is where I commit the sin of like creating a reference goose chase for everyone within the rule, so I do apologize. So any of the 4 things you should not promote or endorse in professional learning, if you're going to cover any of those topics within a curriculum, that curriculum needs to go through the regular curriculum approval process that we have a different board rule for, as you see referenced there in 468. So, and the reason why we said that is we want to make sure that the transparent process, the open and public meeting process that happens with the other curriculum approval is being applied here as well, so that if there are parents who want the opportunity to speak to the curriculum as it might look at those four things, and whether or not they want to debate if it's promoting or endorsing those four things or any of those four things. The opportunity to do so is provided. The same goes for classroom instruction, except it doesn't have to go through the open and public meeting process. Obviously, if you had every teacher doing their classroom instruction through an LEA governing board approval process, those would be very long and frequent meetings. So again, we just want to make sure that they're following the guidelines of this rule, though, the teachers, that once it's in the classroom, they are making sure they're not promoting or endorsing those four things we discussed. And they're using any opportunity they can to incorporate the 10 things that are we would like to see in professional learning, if they're applicable for a classroom setting, to also try and bring those in. So conversations about belonging and inclusion and things like that. Also, just as a reminder, you should already have a formal complaint process pursuant to this rule referenced here, 113. So we, again, didn't want to reinvent the wheel with this rule. And so we just put out there that if a parent does have a complaint or want to do something for a complaint process with, I think, you know, you as this charter school has violated this rule, that they use the process that's already in place for other types of complaints. So you should already have one in place or a policy that outlined that. And if you're unfamiliar with that or what the requirements are, it's in R277113. It's a rule that governs a lot of auditing and financial auditing processes, but it also has a general complaint process. It was tucked into that rule. And we thought it makes sense to just utilize what already exists. And last but not least, rule interpretation. Essentially, this section said we're not banning ideas, we're not banning discussion. So always know that you're free to have conversation. It's really not promote or endorse that any of these four things are fact would be the problem, but to discuss that people have those ideas would not be banned or prohibited by this rule. But you would need to make sure you're doing it in a neutral form, that all sides of an issue are being explored in the conversation and so forth. So that is super exciting presentation on this rule. And as you can hear, Maribel the poodle is like really wanting her jerky. But I'm here for any questions and happy to. I'll also send Marie, you can to send out to everyone else the link to the full expanded version of this training. Has slides that the board approved with speaker notes that are already prepared to kind of like break down the rule even more and kind of explain in depth which each piece means or what the board intended, which again is not typical for us to do with the rule, but on this one we felt the extra guidance was probably welcomed and wanted.
That sounds perfect. I'll go ahead and send those out. Again, if there are any questions, Jeffrey's here for a minute. You can put those in chat. Otherwise, we'll keep moving along with our meeting. And thank you, Jeffrey, so much for being here and for presenting.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will turn the time now over to Malia Height. She's here from Educator Licensing to give us some licensing updates. So Malia, please take it away.
Perfect. Happy to be here. And good to see some familiar faces and names. I have, do I have access? Yes, to share my screen. Okay, I just want to make sure that's happening. I will put in into, oopsies. Well, we may get to do it the old school way. I do have a link to the to these slides so that you can look at them. Let me just copy that for you. So really the purpose of me being here today is to help all of you in making sure that we're meeting the licensing rules, and also provide you with the ways that we can help, and also all of the things that sometimes we'll contact you, and it's really important for us to hear back from you. So that's really the intent. If you have questions, I've got my chat open, and feel free to interrupt me and ask the questions. But really the goal is to help you know how we can help you. So, and the first thing that we're going to talk about are what are kind of the four big things that we're going to hit today, that are just kind of some big ticket items that we've noticed that maybe just need reminders or perhaps some more guidance given. And that's regarding educator background checks, educator licenses, and how that impacts your funding. License renewals, I know license renewal season just started, but I'm sure you've already gotten some educators that are like, I need help with this form. So we'll go through how we can help you with that form. And then some other supports that are available to you and that I wanted to make sure that you were aware of. So first, background checks. Every single educator has to have a background check. And it's part of licensing, but if you have an educator who does not have a license, but they have an assignment in Cactus, they need to have an educator background check through USB. Specifically, they have to be enrolled in FBI wrap-back, which just means that if something happens and someone's arrested or there's a charge or etc., then we're notified by the FBI and then we would notify you. The UPAC secretary would be the one to do all of those things. Something that is a misnomer or a misunderstanding in the field is that when you hire teachers, oftentimes you will do your own background check and you do the fingerprints and you keep track of that through BCI, the Bureau of Criminal Investigation. But your background check does not meet our requirement. We have to be able to have access to the educator's background check. And the way that you know that that's happened is in Cactus, when you look up an educator, it will show that their background check has cleared. And if they don't have a cleared background check, then that means we don't know about it. And Brandy Schultz is our educator background specialist, and she can answer any and all questions around educator background checks. One of the things that we have, we've been attending to this year, and I know Royce has been helping with this, is that charter directors, as you know, don't require an educator license to fulfill that role. However, you still need to have a background check through the USBE. So if you have an assignment as a charter director and there's no background check on file in Cactus, then either someone on my staff or in charter schools will be contacting you to make sure that that gets updated. So before I move on, any questions about background checks?
Yes, I do, Malia. This is Katina Santamaria. I just have a quick question. We have a large after-school program. And so we end up having to do almost 2 background checks a year, if you will. Sometimes we have our staff, our teachers, and then if they participate in the after-school program or the summer school program, then they have to do another background check. My understanding, or at least what I'm being told, is that that's far more deep. It's deeper, as I'm told. Is there a way that we can just do one somehow? Can the educator background be as, I hate to say the same thing, but as deep as this other after school background or the summer school, or is any way to do that to lessen the cost and then the whole thing?
Yeah, so I understand the question, and here's where kind of we get into some of the finer details. So your LEA is required to have a background check policy, and that policy tells us how you're going to attend to the background checks of classified staff, volunteers, after school, any of those kinds of things go through your LEA. Your LEA policy may say something like, if they're a licensed educator, we're not going to run an additional background check. And that can be part of your policy. However, when you start to get into an after-school situation, if it's a childcare, if you're providing childcare, then the level of background check is different. It's not deeper, it's different. So for educators, they're required to do all adult offenses, including expungements. That's the level of background check we look at. For childcare, they look at adult offenses and juvenile offenses, but not expungements. So that's the difference, is that childcare looks at juvenile offenses and educators look at expunged records. But those are the two things that are different. But it depends on if you're getting money like from the Department of Child Services for your after-school program, then they have to do the child care background check, which is different than the educator background check. Cool. You're welcome, Katina. Thanks. It's a good question.
Malia, I did want to say that on your screen sharing, we're still on the title slide, if that's what you intended.
No,
But
it's not.
Perfect. Just wanted to let you know.
Me do a new, oh, I see what happened. Okay, hold on. Let's just do this. Do a new share. Okay.
That looks great.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes it's hard to navigate all the things with all of the many, many screens. Okay. So out of my way. Okay. Okay, so here we go. So here you go. FBI wrap back. Your LEA doesn't meet our requirement, and there's Brandy. And I know that Alicia put our the contact information in there for you. Okay, next stop is educator licenses and money. So having educators and their assignment in Cactus is one of the things that you're required to do as an LEA. But when those people have licenses, then that generates money for your school. All educators with a valid license, and that can be a professional license, an associate license, or an LEA specific license, they all generate the same amount of funding for the minimum school program, which ends up being between $7,000 and $8,000 per educator based on the year and their level of education and some of those other things. But there's three different funds that money will come out of. The first is educator salary adjustment, and that is generated on November 15th of each year. So if you have an educator with an assignment in Cactus, but don't have a license, by November 15th, you won't get the educator salary adjustment for that educator, which is like 2,000-3,000-ish, depending on a lot of variables. The second pot of money is the professional staff costs. And that's at the end of the school year, June 29th is when we pull that data. And so that's, again, if the educator has an assignment and a license, then they generate professional staff costs. And then the third pot of money is supplies and materials. Suzanne asks a very great question. What if they have a license, but they're not qualified for the assignment? So educator salary adjustment only looks for a license. It doesn't look for whether or not they're qualified for the assignment. Whether or not they're qualified for the assignment is the professional staff costs. So if you have someone who, maybe you've got a high school teacher and they're a qualified science teacher, but you have to have them teach a math class, because this is what we do in charters, we pinch hit. So that licensed educator would qualify for the November 15 funding because they have a license. But if for the math class, they wouldn't generate funding unless they had a math endorsement for the professional staff costs. So that qualified for the assignment, which is when you'll see in Cactus, it'll say USOE qualified, yes or no. If it says no, then you're not going to generate professional staff costs. If it says yes, then you will generate professional staff costs. Okay. Supplies and materials are very little. It ends up being like a couple $100 per teacher, but all of those couple $100 add up. So those are the three main kinds of funding. If you need help with any kind of, like, I don't know what kind of a license this person who we've hired qualifies for, anyone on my staff is more than happy to help answer those questions and point you in the right direction of how to help that educator get licensed. The professional staff costs are about $3,000 or $4,000. The educator salary adjustment and pro staff costs end up being close to the same, about. I can't remember exactly because it changes a little bit each year, and it depends on how much education and experience each person has.
Okay, and I'm being kind of a little bug, but I just need to master this, I guess. So if they're highly qualified in most of what they're teaching, but maybe they're taking one class or a couple of classes that they're not considered qualified for, how does that impact the funding?
So for the sake of simplicity, professional staff costs, if we said it was $4,000, if the person is only qualified for 75% of their assignment, then that means you would generate 75% of the pro staff costs. So you would get $3,000 for that educator instead of $4,000, because $3,000 is 75% of the $4,000. So whatever the percent FTE that they are qualified for pro staff costs is how much you would generate. Great question, by the way.
Malia Hanifi speaking here. I have a quick question to you.
Sure.
Let's say we hire someone now, like after November 15, how do they generate, or do they generate any funding?
So they don't generate the educator salary adjustment funding, but they can generate professional staff costs as long as they're qualified for the assignment on June 29th. Okay, any other questions about funding?
Hey, Malia, this is Chris. What's a typical professional staff cost per teacher that each school gets?
Go in and look at the rule. I don't have it in front of me, but it's between $2,000 and $4,000.
Thank you.
And some of you, just before we move on, some of you may have noticed have been contacted. The minimum school program went through an audit last spring through the Office of the Legislative Audit up at the state. And we were looking specifically at internal controls and making sure that we were being fiscally responsible. And so you may have been contacted by our office to respond to that audit, and it is related to this funding. Okay, just making sure my chat's good. Great. Let's move on to license renewals. Welcome to renewal season. Licenses are available to be renewed between now and the end of June. And here are the things that each educator needs. One is a background check. Now, one of the great things about being an FBI wrap-back, which is the level of background check we require, is that if an educator is already in FBI wrap-back, which means they have been fingerprinted after June of 2015, which should be 100% of our active educators, then they don't have to resubmit fingerprints. The background check is already in place. So, so that's one of the really great things. And educators can go in, you can look in Cactus to see if somebody has a cleared background check or not. Or the educator can log into their account through UEN. The second thing they have to do is they have to do the ethics review. That is done at utah.gov/teachers, and they complete the ethics review. If they don't have the ethics review completed, they cannot renew their license. They also have to complete the student data privacy course through the state. This is one of the things that's required. It's a Canvas course that they do, and then it's just a module. And then once they complete that, then they can submit their renewal paper. So we're going to go through the renewal form because I know that the renewal form is a little bit crazy. And that is not the right link. I'll have to update this link. This link is not right. But here's what the new form looks like. Hold on a second, my phone is blowing up. Just turn it off. So the new educator license renewal form is for anyone with a professional license. And that means anybody who has in the past had a level 1, level 2, or level 3 license. When we went to the new license structure, everything was updated and everybody's license became a professional educator license. And so this form is the easiest one to use. It has the greatest flexibility as far as what counts, what doesn't count for renewal activities and points. Also, points are all just hours, which is great. So at the very bottom of the first page, you'll see current licensed administrator. Current licensed administrator is kind of a really interesting form or term because it includes, by board rule, it includes all charter directors that are assigned as administrators. So even if you're not a licensed administrator, if you are currently serving as a charter administrator, then you are counted as a current licensed administrator. So this is you, okay? So you get to sign as a licensed administrator, even if you don't have a school leadership license. So this top part of the second page is the student data privacy course. And this is the thing that is required for all educators. They have to do it, okay? You can't renew if you don't have it. The youth suicide prevention training is required for active educators. So if you have someone who came back and was retired, or maybe they left the profession and they raised a family and now they're coming back, they would be considered a non-active educator, an inactive educator, and do not have to complete that training. And there is a youth suicide training that's offered by USBE that's available, that's excellent. But there also are a variety of other options, including you can do an LEA based youth suicide prevention training, and those would all count. The other thing that sometimes is confusing is that there's annual assessment ethics and an annual code of conduct training. These two trainings are things that you at the LEA provide. They're typically given like that week before school starts when you do all your professional learning and you say, hey, when we do RISE training, you can't video kids taking tests, and you can't like write down questions, and you can't take copies of tests. That's your annual assessment ethics training. And then the code of conduct is when you give the training that says, hey, here's kind of how you have to be a professional as an educator. Don't post garbage on social media. Please be kind to students. Don't swear at students, like basic code of conduct. So these are trainings that you do and already provide. And the board just wanted educators to be able to receive credit towards renewal for attending those trainings each year. So they may complete those trainings or maybe they haven't, but these are all ways that educators can earn hours towards renewal. While we're here in this world, and I just realized I pulled this from an old form, points are really kind of a misnomer when we talk about renewals now. Everything now is an hour. We're trying to simplify it, and so now it's just hours. If you spent 5 hours doing assessment ethics training, then they get 5 hours. If educators spent 2 hours doing youth suicide prevention training, they get 2 hours. There's none of this complicated, like, oh, you sat for 1 hour and it only counts as this many points, and you don't have to do any of that crazy math. If they spent an hour on the activity, they get an hour. They spent 10 hours, they get 10 hours. And this comes in handy when we look at the 4 categories where educators can earn hours. So professional learning is all the things that we consider professional learning. Educators can earn a maximum of 90 hours within that category. This is where you're going to see things like university coursework, PL that you do on campus, any kind of coaching, workshops, conferences. Any of those things would count as professional learning. Okay, so now the question is, well, they took a 3-credit class at the university, so how many hours or points is that worth? That is up to you as the administrator to work with the educator and decide what is appropriate. If they said, well, I sat in class for 40 hours, then you can count it as 40 hours. It's totally up to the discretion of the administrator to determine how many hours the activity is worth. Educator collaboration opportunities are PLCs. So how much time did they spend in a PLC? If they're spending 2 hours in a PLC every Friday and the school year is 30 weeks long, then that's 60 hours in one school year, and you get to count 5 hours or 5 years of activities. So it really is, the goal is to try and make this simple and make it easy. Professional services, if they're serving in some sort of an elected or professional body in a leadership role, if they're elected to a school board, or maybe they're serving in a PTA or anything like that, then that's professional service. And then alternate learning activities are really kind of anything that is like related but doesn't fit into any of those other 3 categories. Something that though we want to make sure is that it's all related to public education. It can't be like, oh, well, but I taught Sunday school, and so that should count. And the board is really explicit about that these activities have to be related to public school education or public school service. So it has to be 100 hours total for a 5-year renewal, and that's it. So the whole goal is make it simple, make it easy, and really just help the educators to focus on the teaching and less on filling out forms and jumping hoops. Typically, you earn at least 20 hours of professional learning in one school year as a teacher. And so if you've got 5 years of teaching, then that's 100 hours. And we're working on a way to make it even more simple, but it's probably another year or 2 down the road until our technology can catch up. So any questions on renewals?
Malia, I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you. If I'm in a position where I'm a director, but also have a teaching license and a teaching assignment, do I do my own?
This is a great question. You cannot sign your own renewal form. So find a friend, find a buddy, anybody who is a licensed or another charter director can sign your form. They don't have to be your supervisor to sign a renewal form.
So like my lower school director could sign it for me or,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
Great question.
Hey, Malia, I have a random question too. Right
Great.
above this on the form, there's the level 3. Have you ever held a level 3 license to get the 25 points?
Yep.
Is that just if you've ever held a professional now?
No, so so as we converted from the old system to the new system, the board wanted to acknowledge individuals who had done the extra work to get the level 3. So if prior to having this now professional license, they held a level 3 license, one time only, you get 25 extra hours towards your renewal. And it's just a way to acknowledge the work that educators have done.
Okay.
Great question, though. Okay, we move on. Okay, so how can we at USBE and educator licensing help? Our website is, we have recently redone it, and there is one of the great things is that there's now an FAQ sheet, which is awesome. And any question that you may have, if it's not in the FAQ, let us know, we'll add it, because really it's hitting most of the things that are here. These are hyperlinked for you when you go to the these slides, you can get straight there. The other is that we have a newsletter that goes out every 2 to 4 weeks. We do send it to charter directors. You'll see it come straight from me, from my email. And it really is to provide you with what's coming up to date, if there's any adjustments, if there's any trainings coming, all of that will be in the newsletter. The newsletters live in a Google folder so that you can access them and access the old ones so that you can kind of see what's there. If we are seeking feedback, we'll ask for it through the newsletter. That really is where we're trying to open up a way for us to let everyone know what's happening in educator licensing. And then trainings. This link specifically is to Cactus training that we did last summer. I know that there are oftentimes questions around Cactus and how does it work and what am I supposed to do? And most of those questions will be answered within that training. We are always happy to answer questions as they come up. So please just reach out and we will assist you best that we can. No, okay, Tess, great question. So Tess asked if Cactus is the only way to quickly check when our licenses, our educator licenses are expiring. Yeah, you're right. That remote login is finicky at best. And another way that you can look is, and I'm going to put the link right here in the chat. This is the link to the educator license lookup tool. And you don't have to log in. You just put in, you can like put in your school, select your LEA and select your school, and it'll show you every single one of your educators. And then you can check their license right there. You don't have to, yeah, person search. You don't have to log in and see it. It will also tell you whether or not, how will it tell you? I don't know if it will tell you whether or not they're qualified for their assignment. I'd have to look. But it does tell you their license and endorsements. Cool. Oh, Alicia says that it does tell you whether or not they're qualified. So you can look there too. Cool. Here are the key team members that you're going to want to know. One is Alicia Romero. She's our executive secretary. She's so helpful. She will send things. She will answer questions. She answers the phone. She keeps track of me. So if I'm lost, find Alicia, she'll find me. And Jane is our office manager. She oversees my support staff and knows all the bits and pieces of licensing in and out, and she is a great resource. She's happy to talk on the phone or answer an email. And then I'm always willing to help best I can. So that really is the end of what I brought today, just kind of hitting some big ticket and timely things for you. And I'm happy to answer any questions that may have come up, but I'm hoping we hit them along the way.
Thank you so much, Malia. We'll go ahead and wait a minute or so, and just if you have those questions, go ahead and put them in chat. I'm sure Malia and Alicia will stay on for a minute and can answer questions too. Otherwise, thank you so much for your presentation. We've loved having you here.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will now turn the time to Connor Warner and Mary Burbank. Connor is an associate professor and Mary is the associate dean at the University of Utah. And they are coming today to talk about some innovations in teacher preparation. So Connor and Mary, take it away.
Thanks very much. I appreciate you having us here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well. So can you see that? Let's see.
Yes, looks good.
All right, cool. Mary, do you want to say hello? Are you here? Mary, you sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks.
She has to go and come back in when she turns into a
Yeah.
Be right
Okay.
back.
All right. Well, when Mary comes back in, she can jump in. We wanted to share with you some work we're doing, but also really seek feedback from you. So what what Mary and I are trying to do is we're trying to take kind of some of the lessons we've learned from the pandemic and look toward the future in teacher preparation and think about ways that perhaps we can be more flexible and more work more closely with the different charters and districts to try to address the growing teacher shortage in Utah. And so we're just looking at different ways that we might be able to adjust programs or meet needs better. In particular, we're right now looking into our how we might be able to collaborate with districts and charters on to help out with Apple programming as we move toward that. So, and Mary, just let me know if you're back.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Okay. All right. Anything you want to say beyond that?
I didn't hear the full
Okay.
overview, but just to reiterate likely what Connor said, we're excited to be here. And one of our goals is to really work collaboratively in how we consider teacher preparation, and we understand the need within the state, and we understand the role of the charter community. So we're grateful for some time with you.
So right now we and we can share this link with you as well. We wanted to let you know that we do currently offer some Apple courses and workshops to help meet some of the needs that you might have. Let me open this and see. So this link, I'll put this link in the chat, assuming I can.
And just to give you a little background on those courses. So for about 7 to 8 years now, we've been providing professional development coursework for teachers who go through the ARL program. And they're typically the methods courses for elementary degree programming. And what we are looking at now is expanding the menus. We've had a very strong response from teachers who were doing alternative routes. And we'd like to be able to think even beyond that to include coursework for people who are interested in working as teacher educators, which many of you have assumed those roles over the years.
Let's see. And I'm sorry, my screen has just gone crazy on me. So let me try again.
Maybe give you a little bit of an overview. So social studies, math, science, language arts, methods courses are typically classes that we're able to offer. We've extended those to this coming summer to include secondary language arts. We understand the last couple of summers have been an anomaly, we hope. Summer of 2020, we had massive enrollments. We know last summer folks had just about had it with anything with a Z in it. So Zoom was not an option for a lot of folks. But we're hoping for a revival of enrollments in the elementary courses. And to your question, we are offering secondary this year. What we found last year is we had a series ready to offer and folks simply didn't enroll. So part of what we're trying to do today is really get a sense of your need and your interest, and we can build possibilities from there.
And Mary, there was a question from Dr. Alejandre about charter schools and student teachers.
Right now, and I hope that those are our friends at Mana Academy. Right now, we along with our colleagues across the state of Utah work primarily in public schools for student teaching. As a rule, that's the case across the board with all IHEs, higher ed institutions. We are interested in possibilities for customized.
Mary, that would include charter schools, since charter schools are public schools.
Sorry, district charters. So district charters, we in our program, for example, we work for work with Granite District and the Salt Lake District, the Ames School in Granite, as well as the Slicksy Science Center in Salt Lake School District. If there's an interest in having interns in a public charter, which, thank you, Marie, we certainly could entertain possibilities, but at present, we all typically work with districts.
So yeah, part of, I think, building off what Mary was saying there, part of kind of what we're exploring might lead into some of those ideas about hosting student teachers or internships. We could certainly dialogue about that. Mary and I are sort of looking, as we're trying to consider what does the future of teacher preparation look like here. We're kind of looking at two ways we might be flexible and might partner. One strand in this is considering flexible options for pre-service teacher preparation itself. We have a fairly traditional four-year bachelor's degree program, and we have some other options, but we know that there are individuals interested in that pre-service teacher in obtaining teaching licenses that can't go full-time in a traditional bachelor's program. And so we're interested in how we might meet those needs. And we're also interested in how we might work with teacher educators who are employed in districts and charters in local education agencies who are running their own teacher preparation programs like the Apple programs, and how we might be able to collaborate to assist with the preparation of district-based teacher educators.
Hello?
Yeah.
Same meeting. This is a big meeting. I'm in this one for like 3 hours. Nope, I just got muted.
Was there a question there?
I have a question. Steve, we've had some teachers that have started to look at the U, but because they've been told they won't be placed in our public charter school, that the U doesn't work with public charter schools, they've then chosen to go to other universities that would do that. They might currently be a professional with us or something like that. So they have not found it receptive. Are you saying that that will change? I still was hearing that you just work with certain districts, and so that was the question. I have no problem also suggesting they look at the University of Utah, but if they can't be placed with us, I don't want them to, not take classes where they can't then work with us.
The goal that we have with this work, and I'll just be very candid and thank you for your question, is to look at folks who are employed by you as teachers who are doing the Apple route. And so at this point in time, we're looking at that population of folks versus our pre-service population. And there are a number of reasons why we've chosen to work with folks who are doing the Apple alternative to a traditional program. And one of them has to do with accreditation. We are held by state requirements for a number of areas, as I know you all are, particularly with the performance assessments. And so for the moment, to your question, we are not looking at internship placements within charters as a rule. And again, I know there are exceptions across the IHEs, but as a rule, the majority of placements are within traditional district programs. And I understand there are exceptions.
Mary, did you want to talk about the summer methods courses?
Sure. And again, sure. And I think really our invitation is to hear from you on what we can provide in terms of the ARL type of courses. You've seen our menu, many of you. We would like to know if you would like to see those offerings expanded. Last year, again, was an anomaly because I think folks had just been burned out on coursework in general. Folks just wanted time away from school in any format. But we're also interested in whether you consider coursework for the people within your districts who are involved in preparing teachers. So for example, we have coursework that we've thought about related to supervision and coaching. We've thought about coursework on classes we use to teach future faculty to become teacher educators. Is there an interest within your communities for those kinds of courses? And what Connor's listed are some opportunities that those of you who are employed within your schools may be interested in as you gain credentials for doing similar work to what we do here at the U. So our accreditors, I'm looking at the request about formal accreditation. Our accreditation is with the Council for the Academic Educator Preparation Program, or CAPE. So our accreditors have specific criteria to which we have to respond for accreditation. There are also state requirements we need to make, which are probably very similar to yours. But our national accreditation with CAPE really drives the direction for our accountability, documentation, et cetera. And so part of the reason we're working with folks who are not pre-service versus teachers who are in service who are doing alternative routes is so we're not complicating that process. Hopefully that makes some sense. Let's see, Carrie Ann, I'm reading your note. The state does not require a formal external accreditor. You are correct. Our university, as with all other institutions in the state, have affiliations with national accreditors. So either AQUEP or CAPE. BYU, Utah, and I believe SUU are the three that still align with CAPE. All other institutions work with AQUEP, yet another acronym. I'm sure that doesn't surprise you.
So I'm hearing from you that there's definitely some interest in dialogue regarding pre-service placements, et cetera, which we're not fully prepared to talk about that, but we'd certainly be interested in hearing from you about your needs there at some point. I guess our other question, as Mary's talking about, is are you running Apple programs with currently certified teachers who are picking up additional licenses, or who are currently have bachelor's degrees and are looking to become certified, and who are going through that route? And if so, are there needs we can fill in that direction?
I'll speak up again since I spoke to the other one. Yes, there are needs. I would say that math and CTE class, if it's the more specific content areas in the secondary, there's those 2 areas that we could use additional classes in. My teachers look in the summer for the ones that fit their schedule, to be honest. And if they can get grants at there's one university that's offering some grants for some classes, and they are using those to try and fill some of their others. So I have no problem sharing with my Apple teachers, and I'm over a consortium and I share it with them when I get the information from the U. To be honest, I haven't gotten much information from you. A couple other universities have been stronger in sending me classes. So that would be one thing I would ask that be communicated out to us. And that way we can share it then with our teachers, and they can then make that choice. I will say that your classes are kind of expensive compared to a couple of other universities. So I do know that that's one reason why. And you've got parameters that you're bound by. But, in full disclosure, we're being really open with each other to help each other here. So.
No, that's what we want to hear. I mean, I think part of why we're here is a recognition that there hasn't been a history of collaboration in this particular area, and getting feedback. And like you said, we're bound by some parameters, some things we have control over and some things we don't. But we don't know until we have dialogue about what some of those things might be.
So it sounds like sending you the direct information. We route through the state office and we route through our district partners, but I'm not sure you're always getting what is routed from the state. So it sounds it's best to just route to you directly.
Marie's really good at getting us information out. That would be a great source to help get it to us. You say you go to your district partners, yes, they'll get it, but to send it to the general population of charters, I feel like Marie or somebody else in the state office that's with charter schools might be a better route.
Sure, thank you.
Yep, I would be happy to send that. And I was going to say for Connor and Mary, I have a lot of feedback coming in on the chat. And so perhaps maybe do you want like directors to reach out to you, or do you want to create maybe a survey for them to maybe give some responses here that might kind of help us with our time and with identifying some of those concerns?
Yep.
It does sound like the main concern right now is the disconnect between working with the University of Utah and the public charter schools that are represented here today. So perhaps we could do that as one of our next steps. Yep. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that sounds great, that we could put together a survey regarding some of these issues to go out, and certainly directors who have specific feedback about any of this are welcome to email me or Mary directly. There's my email there, but yes, we can definitely put together a survey related to some of these issues and send them out to those directors. Maybe we could route that through you, Marie.
That would be great. I'd be happy to help with that.
Wonderful. Anything else, Mary?
No, I think that sounds like a great set of next steps.
Wonderful. Well, Connor and Mary, thank you so much for being here today and for talking about, some of the things that are happening at the University of Utah. And I do think as we continue to collaborate and sharing with each other, that this will only help everyone in the field. So that's exciting.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, moving right ahead, we have Rachel College here, and she is from USPE's Educational Leadership Team, and she's going to be talking about just getting some things on your radar, making sure you're ready for some teacher licensing things that will be coming with as far as evaluations go. Sorry, Rachel, you can probably introduce yourself much better than that, but I will let you take it away from here.
Okay, thank you, Marie. I'm Rachel College, Educational Leadership Specialist at Utah State Board of Education. And one of the areas that focus areas I have is evaluation. So you may remember a few months ago when we met, I was able to join your meeting for a few minutes and go over some of the things to think about in timelines related to evaluation. I'm going to follow up today with some more information. And excuse me if I end up coughing a little here and there. I've not avoided illness, so if that happens, I apologize in advance. So what I'd like to go over then is, let me just see if I can share my screen here. And okay, are you able to see that?
Yes, Rachel, looks good.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so educator evaluation reporting. The reason we have educator evaluation reporting is we actually have it in Utah code direction for charters and districts within code. So I pulled out the components that are applicable to charter schools so that we can go through those together. It's from Utah code R277533. And there's a note specifically for charter schools that all charter schools shall comply with requirements of subsection R277533-6-2 and section R277533-9. So these are what this is what is said in those areas. So in R277533-6, part 2, a school district, and this applies to charter, shall report summative scores annually for all educators using the following approved terminology for reporting. So you have highly effective is a 3, effective is 2, minimal or emerging effective is 1, and not effective is 0. So that's the first component that applies to charter schools. The second is educator evaluation data reporting, which is what we'll talk about more today. And it's a school district or charter because it refers to that, and what is applicable to charters is this section. A school district shall report information described in section 53G 11.5.11, that's Utah code, to the superintendent annually on or before June 30th, and to be included in the superintendent's annual report as required by section 53G 11.5.11. That is, again, Utah code. So the data reported in accordance with this subsection shall be classified as private under Title 63G, Chapter 2. It's under GRAMA. So basically what this is saying is there's really, I guess, 3 things you really need to think about. One is that you're reporting data. Actually, let me go here. You're reporting it by June 30th, and you're reporting it in this manner, okay? So with that, I want to show you what it would look like. We'll go over a couple of ways you can input your data, but ultimately this is the information you would need to gather as you're doing evaluations, which I imagine you're doing them throughout the year, right? You're observing, you're collecting evidence, and you're coming up with the data that you're going to then submit. So you'd have your year, all of this information, the district or charter and the school, the person, the last name, first name of the person will be populated. What you need to worry about is then in the yellow. So the evaluator ID would be the cactus ID of the evaluator, the person who completed the evaluation. And then this summative score, the summative score would be one of those 3 scores here, right? Or excuse me, one of the 4 scores, either 3, 2, 1, or 0. With that, there are a few things to consider as far as where we are now and what your choices and options are as far as reporting this data. So right now, we're what you're really concerned about is continuing to conduct your evaluations, right? Making sure that you're conducting evaluations, that you're gathering evidence, so that you're going to have a summative score for each of your educators when it's to, one, help them understand where they are and helping them learn and grow as educators, but two, to be able to report that score. So that is now. Then before April, as an LEA, you're going to want to decide if you want to manually enter, because there are two ways to enter the data. Manually entering it means you would be going into something that looks similar to what I showed you on the last slide, like this. However, you would be manually entering it within the system. That's an option, and if you choose that option, you need to request access to be able to input educator evaluation data in Cactus. That's option one. Option two is you can submit a flat file. That's what they call it, is a flat file of evaluation data. And the way you go about that is, as it gets closer, there are individuals that you would request that flat file from. So you can choose, are we going to have somebody manually enter this? Or are we going to put it all on the flat file and have the folks at USBE upload it? So those are the two choices. So decide before April, because then the next time I am able to join you, we'll go over what that looks like, those two options. So after April 1st, you could request Cactus access for the manual entry. You could, or request to have the flat file if you've chosen to do batch entry. Then you would have between April and May, you just want to gather the rest of your summative evaluation data. So you'd want to make sure that you have those components that I showed you that you need to have to be able to have your data complete for uploading. And then before June 30th, while June 30th is the deadline to upload your summative evaluation data, we also know that historically it's pretty difficult sometimes to do that once school gets let out. So I would just recommend that while you're actively in school and in the building, it's just a lot easier if there are any kind of difficulties or troubleshooting that you need or support. If you're there and able to do that before you leave for, summer, if you do leave for summer, I don't know, some folks may not, but that's just the final deadline. So kind of getting out ahead of that. So what you could do now, if you think you're going to want to manually enter, okay? So this really only applies if you're going to want to manually enter. You could request to have access as an administrator now to see, but you cannot get access to uploading evaluation data before April. So with that, if your team decides you'll submit your data manually, you could request access to the Cactus database as a school administrator by following the doc that we shared in the previous meeting. But remember, that will make it so you do have access to Cactus, which is a step. But in April, it'll be a different system by which you request access to the actual part of uploading evaluation data. It's a separate thing. They do not open it until April 1st. And so there will be next steps that we will share as they are coming to fruition. They are being built out in March. So we'll be able to share them in April and let you know exactly how you can go about requesting the particular access in Cactus that is for evaluation data. If you do want to get just plain administrative Cactus access now, you could still follow this document. And did it pop up the accessing Cactus database? Okay, as a school administrator, you could do this now, and that is helpful, but just know as a word of caution and also just to let you know, like, what's coming is as you create a Sharewell account, that is the part that will probably be changing in March. And so we'll be giving you the process for requesting the educator evaluation portion in April that would not include that Sharewell portion. So it's an option if you do want to get and need some just administrative access that doesn't have to do with reporting educator evaluation data right now. You can still follow that, or you can wait until April. So again, at this point, the main things to think about are that you're conducting evaluations and that you, as a LE, are determining if you want to manually enter one by one or if you want to get a flat file and then upload the flat file. From what my understanding is, folks tend to prefer the flat file, and there can be less errors with those flat files, and so that might be something to consider. But again, manual entry is also an option. And then knowing which one you're going to choose by the time we gather next time, then that'll help us to navigate the processes for getting you into a space where you're then able to start to upload that and have it done by June 30th. And that is all. Do you have any questions?
Perfect, Rachel. Thank you so much. This is super helpful to make sure we have this on our radar and in preparation for our April meeting as well. I haven't seen any questions come in chat, so if you do have a question, please drop it there. Maybe Rachel can stick around for a minute in case any questions come through. And otherwise, thank you for being here and presenting today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks. It's always great to see everyone.
Agreed. All right, well, next we have Kelsey Eller here, and Kelsey is a child nutrition specialist, and so she's going to be talking about the child nutrition program. So Kelsey, we will turn the time over to you.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks for giving me a few minutes to join you today and talk a little bit about the National School Lunch and Breakfast programs. At this time of year, we're looking for any of the new schools that are wanting to begin operation of the National School Lunch or National School Breakfast programs. So if you already operate these programs, what I'm about to say doesn't really apply to you, although if you have questions, feel free to shoot them at me. But this is really for those of you who don't currently operate the National School Lunch or Breakfast programs and would potentially be interested in doing so. So I'm going to share my screen and give you a brief description of what the National School Lunch Program and Breakfast programs are, what they do, and how you could potentially apply to operate them if that is something that you're interested in. So these are federally assisted programs that operate in districts, charters, residential childcare institutions, both public and nonprofit. And schools that operate them can receive reimbursement, federal reimbursement and state reimbursement from Utah based off of the number of qualifying meals that are served. So if the meals that are served meet specific nutrition requirements and plate requirements, then they qualify for reimbursement both on the federal level and state level. Children obviously can qualify for free or reduced price meals in a variety of different ways. This year has been a little weird, as I'm sure many of you are aware. Most schools in Utah who are running these programs right now are offering meals at no charge to all students based off of the flexibilities that have been given due to COVID. That will likely change coming into school year 2023 because the current flexibilities expire in June. But that is a moving target, so we shall see what happens in the upcoming year. Okay, so the reimbursement, this is just kind of a little bit of a flow chart for you to kind of see how reimbursement works, but essentially based off of the paperwork that is kept on your side if you're running these programs for the meal pattern. So based on meals that are meeting specific requirements for nutrition and food groups, who ate, what, how many students, what, if they qualify for free or reduced price meals, that kind of thing. All of that documentation rolls up into your qualification for reimbursement. And like I said, you do get reimbursement from the federal government, but also from Utah. Currently, that reimbursement comes out of liquor tax. The meal pattern is based off of the 5 different meal components, as we call them, but essentially 5 different food groups: fruits, vegetables, meats or meat alternates, grains, and milk. So the meal pattern right now is based off of foods and not specific nutrients, which is great, but there are requirements for calories, fat, and sodium. So they are well balanced. A lot of times they can look a little funny sometimes, maybe it's a corn dog, but it's probably a whole grain corn dog and used with lean meats and things like that. So school meals do have to meet those standards. They are taken into consideration for age grade groups, the needs of different ages of children, and those are the requirements that make up the qualification for reimbursement. There are one thing that I wanted to kind of convey about the meal programs is that there is a lot of moving parts. They are federal programs. They require a lot of oversight, and there are hiring standards for the people who run these programs. So if you are considering doing so, just do that with the knowledge that there are a lot of requirements, and then it will require at least one full-time position to do the oversight and not actually participate in running the program. So like meal service and meal staff and that kind of thing. It will require at least one full-time position to just oversee the program itself and make sure that everything is intact, right? There are financial requirements, school-wide policies, record-keeping requirements, student eligibility documentation, as well as meal pattern documentation. And just a handful of things as I have kind of laid out here. So please be aware that if you want to apply or if you have questions, please feel free to contact me. My contact information is on the next slide if you do have questions about what this entails. But I did just kind of want to put that out there, that it is extensive and it will require oversight by your LEA. If you are interested in beginning these programs, they are amazing. I love them, which is why I do what I do. We do require that you apply by February 15th of this year. So if you're interested for school year 23, please let us know by that date. The application of intent is linked in that slide. And I can also get that to you. Marie, I'm not sure if you wanted to get my slides from me or how you wanted to do that, but either way,
whatever is easiest for you.
Yeah, we can find a way to get that information to you. The application of intent is quite short. It's only a couple of pages, just information about what were the basics. And then we would move on with a training program after you turned in the application of intent. If you're interested in looking at more information, our website is schools.utah.gov/CMP, and you can look at information there. Our contact information is also there on that website, so you can feel free to contact anyone in our office if you've got questions, or myself. So that's really all of it. I hope that kind of gave you a little bit of insight into what we do. And if you're interested, please feel free to fill out that application of intent. And that's all I had for you. But if you've got any questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. And Kelsey, are charters still also working with Jana Lee, or should all contact go through you? What's the best way for that?
Yes, all contact should go through me. Jana Lee was in our office up until about May. So she has moved on to a position in Granite School District. So I have taken over that role.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to work with you, and thank you for being here. If there are any questions, feel free to drop those in chat and Kelsey can get to those. Otherwise, we'll keep moving along. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, well, we've got about 5 minutes before our next presentation, so I want to go ahead and jump and do those announcements that we skipped over this, not this morning, but the beginning of our meeting. So let me go ahead and go back to my screen share. All right, so it is January, and so we've got some important things coming up this month, in case you missed it. The first one was that our January newsletter came out. In here, as always, you've got a letter from Jennifer Lambert, you've got opportunities that are coming up for charters, a school spotlight, a Dr. Ed editorial piece that talks about some questions or concerns you might have in the field, as well as a calendar of upcoming training events. So make sure you've checked that out. The Utah Jazz are doing their Utah Jazz Scholarship again this year, and that is for Utah students from underrepresented groups. And so if you have students that will be graduating this year, that might be a great scholarship opportunity to look at. This year, we have a little bit more time than we did last year when the Jazz Scholarship came out. The deadline for student application is March 2nd. So make sure that that is on your radar as well. The UVU Stronger Families Project is also getting ready to start. The spring sessions are coming up. There's going to be one in Orem. There will be a virtual session. There will be one at Vista Heights. And it looks like classes run from February 7th through April 21st. So if you have people at your school that are interested in this, you can have them reach out to Debbie Myers. Her email is at the bottom if they have any questions about the Stronger Families Project. Malia referenced the Educator licensing newsletter. There are some links here for the most recent edition. And if you have questions, the executive assistant, Alicia Romero, can get you all taken care of with that. The upcoming training and support from the State Charter School Board. As you know, at the end of our session today, we have our MTSS interventions training for our school leadership, and we are so excited for that. This month, we also have board training talking about executive evaluation, compensation, and transition. So make sure that your board's aware of that, and they can give you a great evaluation and compensate you accordingly. For our teachers, we have a Classroom Management 101 session coming up. If you have some teachers that could use some help and support on that, this might be a really great session to encourage them to attend. And that is January 27th and after school. And then we also have for our business and finance individuals, as well as our school leaders, you're also invited, a financial oversight training about charter fidelity, internal controls, and risk management. And that will be with Rich Hegland again. And he's just doing some follow-up work to the training that he has started with our charter schools. And I will send you this link so you can look at all those February offerings that are coming up as well. We did want to talk about starting next week. We have our big, very exciting training coming from Ed Direction, and this is the K-3 literacy training. And so we are hoping that we will get so many great K-3 literacy educators attending that training. The majority of the training is also after school. There are one of the sessions that occurs during the day, but everything will be recorded. I know that substitutes are really hard to come by right now, but we wanted to recognize the 3 schools that are being spotlighted for their excellent work in early literacy. We have Canyon Rim Academy, and you can see their director here, as well as the teachers that will be spotlighted from their school, as well as their really incredible literacy benchmarks, which is why we are going to be sharing and spotlighting their great work. We will also have Mountainville Academy that we're going to spotlight at those charter seminars, again with Director Vance and her teachers, as well as North Star Academy with Director Archer and her teachers. So if any of our 3 schools, if our directors are here today, great job to you. We are so proud of the work you're doing and excited to share with other schools so that hopefully we can help all of our K-3 students have those great literacy outcomes. Other trainings to be aware of this month. We have our final session of Board Leadership Academy tomorrow. For special events, we have a procurement training coming up from USBE. That'll be on the 21st. And then again, that financial oversight training with Rich Hegland. Also, UAPCS will be putting together an updated flyer and sending that out, so watch for that. But so that it's on your radar, they're going to be doing a policy training series that will actually start January 19th and run through March 30th. And it will, excuse me, just be an hour, I think on Wednesdays, but double check on the flyer. And there is a link to sign up that will be hyperlinked when I send this out, or watching for that flyer. I'm sure it'll have that same information. Our next meeting is February 14th over Zoom, and we hope that you'll be able to join us. And otherwise, we've now made it through our announcements, so let me stop sharing, and we will turn the time over to our State Charter School Board member, Cynthia Phillips. We are so excited to have her here today to talk about MTSS interventions. She is a master teacher and a great leader, and we're all going to learn so much today. I know that some of our schools have invited other members of their leadership team here today, and so we're happy to have you. If you just joined us, welcome, and we will turn the time over to Board Member Phillips.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm having a bit of trouble grabbing my start the slideshow. Let me just get this down, move this down. There we go. Well, first of all, I'm really excited to be here today, but I also wanted to make sure that you all realize how cognizant I am of maybe the fact that you're exhausted a little bit, that you've been thrown a lot of difficult things over the course of this year and last year as leaders, that the last thing you may be thinking about is implementing an MTSS program or improving yours right in the middle of January and February. And so the first thing I wanted to say is that hopefully what I have to talk with you about today and get you thinking about will be something that you can use to help plan for improvement or implementation for next year. I think that the best way to approach where I think administrators are right now and the timing of a program like this would be to think about how plans made now in January, February, March, and through the rest of the school year could be implemented in stages. That's the other thing I wanted to emphasize, in stages next year. Even if you have an MTSS program, but you are finding that it maybe isn't doing everything you'd like it to do, you can take a look at maybe areas with some of the materials that I provide that you can improve your system and that you can make it work better. So just first of all, what is MTSS? It's a framework that essentially aligns and coordinates all the people and resources in your school for designing levels of prevention, intervention, and remediation for academic and social well-being. And it's very much based on data. So just imagine everybody's working toward common goals for student success, and resources are aligned appropriately, and you are reading data to make decisions, because one person's MTSS in their school or even in their grade level doesn't necessarily look exactly like somebody else's. It's very much student-based and data-based. So the approach of MTSS essentially is to identify, that's the most important thing, identifying students with academic or behavior needs. A lot of times we just respond kind of ad hoc to what we think students need, either as a teacher or even as a team. This is a system that allows us to respond, but we also have systemic identifiers for people who are perhaps in need, for students who are in need of MTSS. Now the framework, let me see if I can minimize that. Okay, the framework is essentially multiple tiers. That's what MT stands for, of instruction, intervention, and support, and systems of support are what the SS stand for. And it's a problem-solving process. It requires a lot of evaluation of data, which means you're gathering good data, communication and collaboration. It also means that you have to look at what capacity your school has or your district, multiple schools in the case of some of our charters. And it requires leadership to be continually involved and to hold people accountable as well as themselves accountable for making sure that this framework and this structure is working. Excuse me, I'm getting over this bronchitis, so I apologize for my voice today. Why is MTSS important? I want to make sure that you're engaged and feeling like it's something you want to engage with, because you're going to have to sell that to your people, whether you're just improving a program or you're actually implementing one. I think it's an easy sell, frankly, because we as teachers usually are already engaged in the idea that students should get what they need so that their educational and other outcomes are high. If each student is getting what he or she or they need, then we're looking at increased equity and inclusivity and improved outcomes. And I think that that's the kind of a message you can give to teachers and other administrators about why it's important to have a good MTSS program at your school. It's also been demonstrated that if you have a good MTSS program that's being well run, people are accountable for it, that it creates a very positive environment for all students, which in turn impacts school climate. It also provides teachers who are worried about their students and who can't always provide all the things that a student needs just in the classroom with support, because we get worried and we get anxious about students falling behind, and we might even be doing some extra tutoring with those students outside of work hours even. But if there's a good MTSS program, then everybody benefits from the climate at the school. And it is a leading indicator of increased academic achievement, increased teacher retention, and reduced discipline referrals, which are all fantastic. So that means if we have a good MTSS program, we're not burning our teachers out in quite the same speed that we might otherwise be, and that our students are doing better both with their behavior and with their academics. And there can be varieties. I wanted to say that, if you visit a school that has a really great program and you just can't imagine that exact look at your school, that's fine. MTSS focuses on the needs of the students at your school, and what may look like a tier 2 intervention in one school, maybe a tier 1 intervention in another school. And so, and we all have different, not only do we have different demographics, different students, but we also have different communities, and even the larger community of parents. We have some very supportive parents in schools, but other schools have less supportive parents. So your MTSS needs to look like what will serve your students in your community. And of course, the goals are basically creating schools where all students have their needs met, and where there's collaboration and ownership among all stakeholders toward that end. So just a couple of, making sure we understand a couple things before we kind of start to evaluate our own programs with some activities. What is the difference between PBIS and MTSS? And I'm terrible with acronyms, so I'm going to venture positive behavioral intervention and supports. How about that? But it essentially, PBIS is something we all should have, but that would be almost like a subset of a good MTSS program, where all of these supports, academics, behavior, social well-being, are aligned, and PBIS could be a part of that for behavior. And of course, any other thing that you're doing, such as restorative practices, trauma-informed practice, character education, and culturally responsive teaching, would fall under the large umbrella of MTSS and can overlap with PBIS. So what is the difference between MTSS and RTI? Because most of us kind of were familiar first with RTI before MTSS, and both they actually can be the same thing. However, most of the time, MTSS relies on RTI data on both behavior and academic outcomes, as well as social emotional learning, that drives decision-making and problem solving. But if your RTI program is essentially helping students with reading and math, I applaud you for having that. We need it. But by itself, that would be insufficient to be deemed MTSS. However, if you in fact have implemented your RTI so well that are gathering data in all of the relevant areas touched by MTSS, making decisions based on that and providing supports and interventions based on that, then your RTI is in fact MTSS. So I think I wanted to just mention that because sometimes we get caught up in the name of something. And really what we should be looking at is what is substantively happening at our school. And maybe we have a really good RTI program for students who need remediation in math and reading, but that's kind of where it has stopped. And maybe we even help students with behavior plans and contracts and give them all kinds of support if they're struggling in certain behavioral areas. And we're seeing all kinds of good RTI data from that. That still isn't quite a full system of supports that is multi-tiered, but it's still very, very far along that path. So again, it kind of depends on what your RTI looks at your school and if you have set it up in the way that I'm describing MTSS. So one of the other things we need to consider is that MTSS isn't just something that you have in place, nor RTI for that matter, to qualify students for special services. Instead, the goal is to bring targeted support for students in all areas, really, to ensure their success. And that doesn't mean that MTSS and RTI don't at times help us to identify students who may need more than just MTSS support. And that would be students who may have a learning disability and are unable, even with the supports provided through a multi-tiered system of supports, to access their education. And so then they would qualify for special services. But I think that sometimes because that last thing happens, MTSS is occasionally looked at, and as well as RTI, as a path towards special education. And that's very much, that would need to be a redirection that you help any of your staff members with or yourself with if you're thinking of MTSS in that way. Is universally designed learning connected to MTSS? Well, only in this way. It's a best practice for Tier 1 classroom design for instruction. It's very engaging and it allows for students to learn in a personalized way and very differentiated, and also to demonstrate their learning in a variety of ways that are very personal and speak to their strengths. So you could say that it's a very good Tier 1 practice and approach, but by itself, it is not MTSS. It would be a subcategory in Tier 1 of tiered instruction and support there. And then we sometimes think about, well, what about our students who are in the top, quartile, or what about our students who are above and beyond the grade level in what they're doing? Well, they're definitely, typically, MTSS considers those students where there's a gap and where we're trying to help close that gap. And it often answers the question, how do we respond when students haven't learned? However, it can be viewed and it can be implemented, and in my opinion ought to be, to extend learning as well, which is how will we extend the learning for students who are already proficient so that their outcome is in fact still one that's on a growth trajectory. And so that's something to think about as well. And that's typically done in Tier 1 or in extension types of classes and clubs, but still should not be ignored. So I want you to take an inventory, take just a few minutes and take an inventory of what you currently do at your school that provides support for your students struggling with academic behavior or other things. And ask also if your support is comprehensive. Is it one good team or one good division of your lower elementary school or your middle school or your upper school, or a department that is doing such a good job with this? Or is it something that your school is doing as a whole? And if they're doing it as a whole, is it being done well? Are parts of it being done well in a systemic way? So just take a couple minutes and maybe jot some things down. Maybe I'll ask a couple people to kind of unmute and share. Maybe identify yourself when you do so, just for my sake, because I've had to minimize everything except my slides. And I would like to know, where you are right now in your mind, without knowing maybe where the experts think you should be. We'll just take a second. Okay, could I get somebody to maybe be brave and talk to us about your success, your failures, or something in between?
Cindy, I'll jump in.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Steve and I are colleagues, by the way, and I always appreciate his boldness and his willingness. Thank you, Steve.
My camera on there. Yeah, I feel like this is something that I think at our school we do well here and there in pockets, and certainly the time over the last couple of years has affected this. And I've been thinking about what does go well. I think teachers at our school are really good at identifying students who are struggling and bringing that to the attention of their team members and their administrators. And then we do a really good job of I think brainstorming and coming up with ideas that will help. I think the struggle that I feel is the comprehensive nature of this, and sort of getting everyone that needs to be involved in it on the same page and communicating together about, what the plans are for a student or a particular group of students, and then carrying those through, and then kind of deciding or determining like how effective were they? Like, did those things that we did work well with the students, or how well did they work? And are we seeing the kinds of the kinds of improvements that we had hoped for? And part of that for me, just coming into this role as the pandemic began, is just the sheer number of students who seem to be in need of some kind of support, behavioral support, social emotional support, academic support. And so I think that, like I said, on an individual level, I think teachers do this. I think a good teacher is naturally always watching for students who need extra help. But it's the sort of larger organizational piece and coordinating that with across the school that I think is the challenge.
Thank you so much. And actually, Steve, you have identified the very thing that at least the experts that I reference in my PowerPoint, so that Marie, by the way, has this for you all if you'd like a copy. And at the end, I have sources. They all suggest, Steve, that's the very, very hardest thing to do, what you said, that you've got good staff and a lot of people willing to kind of work extra hard and identify the kids and do extra things for them as needed, even teams that will collaborate together by department or by grade level. But the systemic nature of it, it is kind of, it's an extra number of steps and resources committed and organization and accountability and follow through that are not easy. And especially, as you said, at a time when we have so many students who seem to need MTSS, right?
Absolutely.
Is there anybody else who would like to share kind of where they are?
I'd love to share. This is Carrie Ann from Moab.
Thank you,
I know
Carrie
we're-
Ann.
I echo Steve on that we're doing a great job of identifying the students and then diving into, oh, and it's not just this, but really getting down to the minutia of what it is that they need. But we're struggling with the consistency of staffing, consistency of materials, consistency of student attendance, and all of those kind of things. And it's, we feel like we start getting something happening and then the kid's gone for a month, and then we have a staff member spouse has to move, or they have to move in, or they've got COVID, and it's just all sorts of things. It's just this constant, and year to year down here in Moab, we're so transient, such a tourist community. We're struggling with staff consistency. So I feel like we're rebuilding each year, and I'd love to hear some suggestions on what have schools done to set so that we have things in place, but it's like we have to completely overhaul the training each year to fit the new staff members. So I just would love to hear some more from others. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. And I'm hoping that, because I'm not sure that the experts that I will reference and the content will solve all of those problems. But one thing I think that we all can agree on as educators is that, and that's teachers, administrators, paraprofessionals, support staff, counselors, is that even in a school with high turnover, which hits all of us depending on the year, some have less of that than others, and you're in an unusually difficult circumstance, that we all, I think, could agree that when we establish systems, that is to say, think of some systems you've established, certain curricula that you've established at your schools. That's a system. Maybe PLC, professional learning communities. You actually have established certain systems at your school, which makes it so that when someone leaves, that at least there's a system that someone new is coming into. Now, if everybody from that, if the system implodes because all of your staff is gone, that's very, very difficult. And I do, it's a rebuilding time, right? It's a building capacity time. But I'm hoping that some of the things that, and the tools that I give you today will at least allow you to set up systems that make those kind of bumps a little smoother, because you have built capacity in your institution. People can step in to fulfill a role, and that at least the whole group that is remaining is engaged and supportive of what you're doing. So let's talk a little bit more about that. And thank you all for, even those who maybe, the majority of you that didn't comment, nevertheless, I'm hoping you took an inventory so that you could know where some of this other might be helpful. So the elements of a systemic response include, and the most important thing is identifying students. So Steve talked about how his school identifies students well. Carrie Ann, that's probably a strength of yours as well. If you have that as a strength, you're partway to establishing a really good MTSS system. So take a deep breath on that one. Determining the right intervention to meet the student's needs, monitoring each student's progress and determining if the intervention is working. Sometimes we start to break down here a little bit, where one person might be doing that really well, but maybe as a team, we're not doing it as well, and we're not communicating back and following back. Revise if the student is not responding to the intervention. And sometimes we let that get to a crisis point, and then extend once the student has mastered the essential curriculum. And of course, in that, I'm not just considering academics, but behavioral, social, emotional learning, et cetera. We talked about identification being the most critical step. It needs to be flawless. And so you need to have some things you're doing at your school. A lot of times, many of you are doing adaptive testing on 3 data points throughout the school year. That's excellent. Common assessments, universal screenings that are provided are also helpful. And other staff recommended processes. Observations and other sorts of things can be very helpful, but these are things that you need to determine as a school and then just stick to like glue. Another thing that the experts suggest is that making sure your students' voices and students' participation are present in your MTSS, to actually ask our kids who are receiving services, whether it's, students who are receiving some English language training, or some students who are getting remediation for a subject, or are getting supports for behavior. We need to ask them, how are things going? Is this working for you? What do you think would help you even more? And when students are heard, the data shows that school becomes very relevant to their lives. And so engaging students in that conversation of their own intervention and their own progress is really an important part. And basically, if you've got something that's working well at your school, I put this slide in for this reason, so I wouldn't forget to say this. If you've got a research-based initiative that's working well at your school, an intervention, don't change that. Include it in your model. Make sure it becomes a part of anything else that you're doing, because your teachers are probably successful with it. You feel good about it as a leader. Your group knows it. Keep it in place and include it in the larger systemic model. Excuse me. So this is one thing that that Marie can provide to all the people who are participants and who would like to have this on. This comes from an excellent book that I would recommend called The MTSS Startup Guide, Ensuring Equity, Access, and Inclusivity for All Students. And it's from Jessica and John Hannigan, and they have done such a nice job with that. They're referenced in my sources. And basically, this readiness screener, and I want you to think about this, you kind of give yourself a score based on the following factors: whether your vision and mission are aligned, excuse me, with an MTSS program and how they are, so that you can sell this to your stakeholders, the need for it. So 0, yeah, we're not ready. We don't even know why we need this. The need is clear to some, but not others. You would give yourself a 1. The need is made clear and supported by data. You're ready to go. Willingness, is leadership behind it? Have your staff made this a priority to implement? And depending on what the willingness is, you give yourself a score. Is there funding? Is the funding available, or can it be reallocated to meet the needs of implementation? And sometimes you get a score of a 1 if you just are at least considering how you can ensure that you have the proper staff for a program like this. Do you have accountability structure in place? This is almost always for people, even who have the beginnings of a decent MTSS. Sometimes this is a 0 or a 1. And this is where a lot of MTSS programs fail, to be frank. Implementation is optional with no clear outcomes identified. So even if you've got goodwill and actually expertise in your teachers and your counselors and your paraprofessionals, if it's kind of wishy-washy as to what the goals are, what outcomes we're looking at, and where we're going to talk about those outcomes and how we're going to adjust the interventions, if no one's held accountable, and if there's not someone overseeing, even if it's a lead teacher or a dean or whoever may have been designated, it just doesn't get much further than identification and some okay interventions that you hope are making a difference, but you don't really know if they are. That's not a good MTSS program. So I wanted to stop and kind of push on that accountability button. Leadership capacity, that's something you'll be able to assess rather well, because you are the leaders of your schools. Ability to implement and monitor progress. So accountability and structure as a structure, but then the ability to do that, the capacity to do that, so that you might have a structure in place for accountability, but is someone actually doing it and monitoring? And then the time commitment. The last thing we should do right now, and can do even, is add something that's not there onto teachers, because they are so they're feeling the crunch of their responsibility to try to help these students close the gap. Even their tier 1 students are behind from last year. So again, I want to just preface any remarks by saying, remember that any kind of an implementation should be incremental, and it should be well prepared for and planned. And even if only baby steps are taken in August and September, you could then take additional steps each semester or each year, and that would be wonderful, wonderful improvement. So I'd like you to make a list of 2 or 3 obstacles or challenges based on that readiness screener that you are experiencing at your school. You don't have to use the same words they did. I know the slide's not in front of you, but or that you may experience if you begin to implement or begin to plan the implementation of good MTSS program, a good MTSS model. So, 1, 2, or 3, and let's just take a minute and I'll have a few people share on maybe the obstacles that they see. Do we have some individuals willing to share, just to unmute and introduce yourself and let us know what are some obstacles or challenges that you either are facing or that you think you might face if you kind of push a good MTSS model?
I'm happy to share a little. Tess Minor Fair, Winter Sports School. And I'd say the challenges or obstacles that we face certainly have to do with time commitment. And partly for me, that's connected with data collection, is being able to collect consistent enough data and then to be able to respond with some agility to that data to make use of it. I think inherently and intuitively, we know we are doing a lot of really good things and that they're having positive effects. But I don't believe that we are yet effectively collecting data to demonstrate what's effective and what isn't so effective. We just kind of keep moving because time goes out the window. And sort of related to that time commitment as well is the accountability piece, my role in being able to make sure that we're holding ourselves as a staff accountable for that consistent implementation, that I feel like is a current challenge.
Thank you so much, Tess. I think you're absolutely spot on. And the idea of using timely feedback in a timely way, it's a challenge, isn't it? And it has to be considered and planned for, or what happens is it doesn't happen, right? Anyone else like to share?
Cynthia, I just had a question that kind of, this is Steph Schmidt at Early Light Academy. I had something that kind of is on the heels of that comment from Tess, is that one thing we've found is we have some teams that do a lot better with finding data or being able to make sense of the data and then implement something as a result of that data. And we just realized we had one team that kept getting really frustrated, and we were frustrated. And then we realized we needed to get all the key players in the same room, our data specialist, our elementary principal, and we were all in this same room with this grade level team. And it was super productive because we were able to really empower the team to implement changes as a result of the data. And I think they were appreciative, because I think they were assuming we expected something bigger than we did. And once we were able to sit down with them, they realized, it needs to be super simple. That's an admin expects it to just be super simple. They're not asking for majorly different things to happen, that kind of thing. So I think just making sure you're all on the same page and reassuring the teachers who are actually, working with the students, that that we want it to be simple and just small incremental changes.
That is such an important piece. I really appreciate both of your comments. And I think something that you said reminded me that, if you've got a good MTSS team as part of your implementation, which the best programs do, we'll talk about that next, you actually can use their expertise to not only give a consistent message to your other teams, but to build capacity among all your levels, right? And all your grade levels, groups, departments, however your school is managed. So thank you so much. Such important comments. And also, I don't know, it helps if you're one of the directors sitting there that hasn't talked, that just thinks, okay, other people are feeling the same way I am, and they're struggling with the same things I am, because these are the things that institutions, that schools struggle with when they're trying to implement a good model. So here are some red flags to consider as you begin, and we're going to do our own little MTSS startup assessment. Shared leadership is not practiced. If you're not sharing leadership in your school, and your decisions are made exclusively by you as the director, that's kind of a red flag that it's going to be difficult to get a good MTSS program up and running. MTSS team members and stakeholders do not know the purpose of MTSS. These are things that will need to be addressed even before you begin. Few know the mission and vision of the school and how it is aligned to MTSS implementation. Parents, community, and partnerships do not feel as if they can contribute in any way. Students' voices are not considered. Now, I'm guessing we all have at least one of those red flags, and that's okay. I just wanted to make you aware of them so that you can, being cognizant of them, that you can actually address them as part of your implementation. Some other tips to consider: set up a process for shared leadership, develop collective commitment to the program ahead of time. So that might take some real thought about your PD at the end of this year and the beginning of next year, as you seek to maybe improve that system at your school. Frequently educate stakeholders on their purpose on the team and the role they play in successful implementation. Revisit the mission and vision together and educate stakeholders on how the mission and vision align to the MTSS model, and include a student representative. Or I liked the tip from the research that you actually have several students rotating through to provide input to the MTSS team about their need for success. And what a great idea. I mean, we have a good MTSS team at our school, but I'm not sure we've ever included students on it. And so that was something that really struck me as such a wise tip to consider. So the students have such a different perspective from ours, and they're sharp and they feel deeply, and they've got really important things to offer. So I'm going to take you through an MTSS startup assessment in this last part of our time together. And it's designed to assess the 10 starting indicators in implementing a really good model. And what I like about it is that I think you can use it. I personally think it can be used as something that goes beyond just a startup indicator assessment, but rather something that you can then go back to and monitor how you're doing. And of course, this initial assessment establishes a baseline for you on where you are in implementation, but it also then provides kind of a pathway and a road for the next steps you need to take. And then you can go back and see how you're doing on each of those steps to help you monitor the overall implementation of your program. And this is something that Marie can send out as well from those same authors that I mentioned before. So just to be thinking, I wanted to kind of hit this a little bit harder, because otherwise I'm going to have you just quickly score yourselves on some of these things. But I wanted you to think about your MTSS team. Some suggestions from the experts about who should be on that team are the principal or director, vice principal, if you have some assistant directors, psychologists, lead teachers, a SPED director or coordinator, a SPED teacher, a gen ed teacher or two, especially if you have multiple divisions in your charters, and other stakeholders and representatives. We talked about parents and students. And one of the things that I noticed from a different group, Clark and Dockweiler, have written 2 different books, one called Multi-Tiered Systems of Support in Secondary Schools and one called Multi-Tiered systems of support in elementary schools. But in both, they talk about how rather than just letting people volunteer, though you can have a group of volunteers on the MTSS team, they suggest that you have a hybrid model of appointing and allowing volunteers on that MTSS team so that you can ensure as an institution that you have the expertise you need, even though volunteers often bring all kinds of good energy and can become experts. I mean, that's a really good way to build capacity. Nevertheless, you want to make sure that you have the experts you need on the team. You're going to need a really good team so that they can actually turn your strategies and plans into actions, and that they are using and modeling evidence-based decision-making and problem solving as they teach others how to do that well, and as they actually model and help others do that well, much like a good administrator, you know, in a PLC. The suggestion has also been, and I'm doing a little bit more on teams because I think this is where we sometimes struggle as well. It's a piece that helps us with accountability and implementation and ongoing monitoring and success. These are the things that need to be established in advance. Are they meeting once a month, twice a month? Are they meeting with grade level teams, with divisions and departments, so that they can look at the overall program, not just a single intervention for one student? And what kind of data are they utilizing as a team, which should mimic what your smaller teams are doing at grade levels or departments. So academic data, staff input, behavior data, social and emotional learning data, student input, attendance, SMART goals, and progress monitoring on those, the data that would allow you to progress monitor, and other stakeholder input such as school process data. That would be on a high level, administrative level data that you might gather. And additional data might be subgroup or demographic data, would, you know, students who spent the whole year online last year as opposed to came sometimes, achievement data, discipline data, perception data from students, parents, and staff. So that could be through surveys and data from locally designed assessments. And then a consideration of how you gather data from teachers who are not on the MTSS team. Are there MTSS leads in each grade level or division? Are there lead teachers who can act in that role? Can there be interfacing of individuals on the MTSS team with grade level PLCs or department PLCs? So that all has to be considered in advance. Are there sub-teams of the larger MTSS team, like a prevention team, an intervention team, a remediation team, a counseling team, a social and emotional learning team, a student wellness or student life team? So your job for the next little while, because this is going to go very quickly, this part, you're to have a pen and a paper ready or put it digitally into a Google Doc or something. And I want you to assess your program currently at your school on the 10 MTSS indicators. I'm essentially taking you through the startup assessment. 0, give yourself a 0 if the thing that comes up is you don't have it in place. Give yourself a 1 if it's in progress. Give yourself a 2 if it's in place with success criteria evidence. Then you're doing very well. And keep in mind that you're trying to have out of 20 points, with 2 the high for each one on these 10 indicators, you're trying to have an 80% higher goal. And again, that might be something that you achieve in 3 years, but that would be the goal, to be at 80% or higher. So out of 20, you know, obviously you want to have, I mean, it'd be nice if you had a score of 16, that would be wonderful, but 18 would be even more divine. So first of all, indicator 1, establish an MTSS team with shared responsibility. So where are you with that? 0, not ready. 1, in progress. 2, ready for implementation. Oops, sorry, my bad. That was the team. We're going on to number 2, solidifying purpose. Where are you in the process of assessing stakeholder beliefs, perceptions, shared values, and identity? And in establishing the mission and purpose of the MTSS team and all stakeholders, what their purpose is in the program as well. Give yourself a not ready 0, a 1 in progress, or a 2 ready for implementation. Roles and responsibilities is indicator 3. Establish and apportion roles and responsibilities among the MTSS team members. Ensure that all stakeholders have shared ownership and responsibility. 0, not ready. 1, in progress. And 2, ready for implementation. The 4th indicator is review and assess. Have you audited your current organizational structure and evidence-based practices for academics, behavior, and well-being to note whether there is a tiered processes, whether there is a continuum of supports, whether you have the programs you need to support that program, the MTSS model, whether you have the teams you need. Again, MTSS team isn't the only team that you would need. Your grade level team should be doing PLCs to make this work well. Your departments, your divisions, your counseling group, your special education group, and then of course, human resources. Do you have what you need to make this MTSS implementation work? So 0, not ready, 1, in progress, and 2, ready for implementation. Number 5 would be to assess your instruction. And one of the important things about this is that we forget that the most important thing about MTSS, and I want to just stop and just emphasize this for a second, is that you have good tier 1 instruction. I mean, I know that sounds so obvious, right? Once I say it, you think, well, duh. But if you are instructing, if you are doing well in tier 1 on social and emotional learning, on the content and your standards, on behavior, if teachers are instructing about that in class in tier 1, you are going to have a much better opportunity to implement other good tiers. You can see how that would be. If you're not doing well in tier 1, you need to start there, because you can't have good tier 2 and 3 regardless of whether it's social, emotional, academic, or behavior, or other things you might identify as needing tiered instruction, if tier 1 is melting, right? So how is your tier 1 instruction? How is the level of your instruction in the other tiers, if you have them? Is it good enough that you are ready, not ready, in progress, or simply just, that's something that you need to work on as a first step? Use SMART goals. Have you made goals for your program, whatever program you have currently? Are you using SMART goals as an institution for academics, behavior, social, emotional learning? Are you measuring your goals on whether they've been met on assessments, screeners, trends, qualitative and quantitative data? And I'm guessing you're probably doing this in some areas. So I would also ask on the indicator 6, what areas are you doing it in, and where you would give yourself even a 2? And where do you have just deficits where you need data and it's just 0? So maybe differentiating that self for your institution a little bit. And remember that SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Sometimes timely is time sensitive, and sometimes realistic is relevant, but SMART goals. So number 7 indicator, progress monitoring system. And this is a bit tougher. We had some directors who expressed that we're really good at identifying and getting in there with interventions, but monitoring progress is a bit harder. Where are you in this process? Have you set up progress monitoring as benchmarks for MTSS? Have you ensured that assessment and data are up to date and available for decision-making? We talked about how hard that is to sometimes have the data in a timely way and then make decisions in a timely way on that data. So give yourself a 0, 1, or 2. Communication, indicator 8. Set up clear communication between the MTSS team and all stakeholders. Is that happening? Do you have feedback loops? Do you have ways of ensuring that the MTSS team is hearing from all the stakeholders in your building, and that they are being heard by the MTSS team as well and giving their data, and that they're communicating with each other on the smaller teams that are interacting with the kids directly and providing the interventions and the preventions as well. Indicator 9, professional learning. Set up an ongoing MTSS professional learning for all stakeholders. Is this kind of something that's systemic in what you do? And I will just give a little shout out to Steve. I will say this does happen at our school. I would say that was a 2, Steve, personally. This is really important because you want all your, especially if you've got high turnover in your staff, you want to onboard new people with all kinds of engagement and investment in your MTSS program and an understanding of how that's just a part of who you are as a school. So this professional learning must be ongoing. It must be very positive and helpful and help the teachers feel as though they can do those interventions better because of the training than they could the day before or the week before. And then continuous improvement is indicator 10. Set up a process for ongoing evaluation and continuous improvement of MTSS implementation and effectiveness and fidelity. Now, your process is going to look different from the process that my school might set up, right? For monitoring the actual program. And, but nevertheless, the nice thing about that indicator, once it's set up, you will look at all of these indicators regularly to ensure that they are moving to the next step, 0 to 1, 1 to 2, etc. So I think we'll just do maybe 2 of these. We'll skip the district-led school. We have just a couple more minutes. I'd like you to respond to these study scenarios. And by the way, let me just go back and say, when you think of those 10 indicators, and they are again on a document that Marie can provide, you could actually use that MTSS assessment, implementation assessment, startup assessment as your way of monitoring your progress and the sustainability of your program. Once each of those things gets started, you can circle back as an administrative team, as an MTSS team, and look at those indicators continually to ensure that your program is reaching its potential so that the kids are reaching their potential. So here we have the first scenario. This is the everything school. And we can all relate to this a little bit. This is an extreme version, of course. The current leadership team at everything school does not use stakeholder feedback or data when discussing next steps or actions to improve academic or behavior success for students. The goals of the school are unclear and continuously changing, and no current data are available to present the various levels of need to all stakeholders regarding next steps and the new initiatives being implemented in each tier at the school. In fact, there's a large disconnect between what the school leadership claims as an array of programs, initiatives, and interventions happening at the school and what teachers, staff say is actually happening. So you've been given the directive to establish an MTSS framework at this scenario 1 school. I want you to keep in mind the MTSS readiness startup assessment that we just did, and consider maybe the first couple of steps that you would take, because you might have some directors listening on this particular meeting who don't know where to start. And here's a school that we can all relate to in parts. You know, I always think of that, and I'm trying to remember which. It wasn't John Hattie, but one of these famous guys in education wrote a book, and one of the things he said was that the first thing that he did when he came into a school to help them with continuous school improvement was, to talk to one of these old veteran teachers. She was probably a lady my age, kind of oldish and grandma-ish, and he said to her, "What do you think about this this new program that your school wants to implement?" And she her face didn't change, and she looked at him and she rolled her eyes, he said, and she said, "This too shall pass," right? We want to make sure we get ahead of those kinds of attitudes for MTSS. There might be a few things that need to just come and then go that we've all tried as directors or teachers or other things, but MTSS isn't really one of them. It might come in a different name in 10 years or 15 years, but the idea of intervening to help students is a really good idea. So go ahead, take a minute, and then we'll see if some people can share on how they would start to help this poor school as with first steps. Would somebody be brave and say how you would even start anything at the everything school? And remember, this was a school that doesn't really use a lot of data when they go to try to help students with academics or behavior. And some of the objectives of initiatives seem to be lacking anyway that are implemented. Go ahead.
I think, Cindy, I would start with just a conversation with a teacher, if we're thinking of that example, the teacher, and ask the teacher, what are they doing? How do they help their students who are struggling? And then talk about how the school itself could help support that work in a way that continues beyond her classroom. Because I think that's what's happening here, right? Is trying to take all this individual work that's happening in good classrooms around an institution and try to coordinate and bring it together so that we're all kind of working together for the same things rather than piecemealing it every year and not communicating with each other. So I would start with her and, get her to talk about the things she does, and then say, this is a way, for us to support that and carry it forward beyond her classroom.
Okay, so what I hear you saying, Steve, is that you would, first of all, get teachers engaged with this program, with this model, with this framework by appealing to the reason they're even in teaching, right?
Yeah.
And connect it to what they already know and care about and get stakeholder engagement and investment. And that's literally the first step, in implementing an MTSS program, is to get stakeholder engagement and establish your team, right? And that person is the one you would want on the team. You get her engaged, and everybody's gonna follow suit. She's gonna explain to everybody why it's important that they do something. Is there anybody else who has an idea about how to help this school a bit in their implementation as they begin their first steps? Well, our time is just about up. There are some other, in the PowerPoint, there are some other scenarios which we will not worry about today. I wanted to show you from the sources, one of the books that I just really enjoyed was the MTSS Startup Guide, Ensuring Equity, Access, and Inclusivity. I felt it was short and accessible. I felt that it was based on very good research, and it has these charts in it that Marie will be sending to you that can actually be your blueprint for an MTSS model implementation, and can be your blueprint for monitoring a successful MTSS program. So I hope this has been successful. I'm not an expert at either implementing or even following the directions of an MTSS program, but I've done it pretty well. And I certainly believe in it and am part of a team that wants to do it better. And for that, I'm also appreciative at my school. Marie has this PowerPoint. I apologize for the one typo I saw in it as I was giving my presentation. And I hope that there have been some things in this presentation that can help you to take incremental steps in improving your program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Board Member Phillips. Are there any questions? We can stay on for a minute in case there's a question. Otherwise, this is the end of our meeting. So we will send you off. Please feel free to stay on if there's a question. I am stopping the recording so I can send you off with a song because I always love to do that.
Hey, Marie, there was a
Yeah.
question in the
Oh,
chat.
let's get it.
I
What
just,
was
it
the
said, any
question?
chance we can see the readiness screener separate from the presentation? I can't really read any of it. I sent Marie PDFs of both the readiness screener and the MTSS startup assessment, and she can send that out to all the participants of the meeting, I think, can't you, Marie?
Yes, I can send it.
Along with the PowerPoint, if it's something you want to use for your admin team or some of your, high-end stakeholders, your board, there might be slides in it that would be useful. And Marie's going to send that out again. My apologies for a typo. In fact, Marie, what I'll do is I'll probably fix that typo because I'm OCD, and I'll send you out a clean version. Okay.
Sounds great. Yep. Well, so we will get that sent out. I'm stopping recording now. Have a great day.